Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
Good morning and welcome to today's episode. I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and each day I invite you to join me as we reflect on a significant moment from our shared past. Today is November 22nd, and we're looking back 62 years to November 22nd, 1963. At 12:30 in the afternoon, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy's motorcade turned onto Elm Street in Dallas, Texas. Seconds later, shots rang out. The president was struck twice. At 1 p.m., he was pronounced dead at Parkland Memorial Hospital. He was 46 years old. The assassination of President Kennedy is one of those rare moments where time seems to divide into before and after. An entire generation remembered exactly where they were when they heard the news. Walter Cronkite removed his glasses to announce the president's death. Jackie Kennedy's blood-stained pink suit, the flag-draped coffin, John saluting his father's casket. These images seared themselves into the national consciousness. But Kennedy's assassination is more than a story of national trauma, though it certainly was that. It's a story about how a single act of violence can fracture public trust, about how unanswered questions breed suspicion, and about how conspiracy theories can persist for decades despite extensive investigation. It's a story that echoes powerfully in our current moment of political division, conspiracy culture, and fears about democratic stability. President Kennedy came to Dallas as part of a political trip to Texas, a state crucial to his 1964 re-election hopes. Texas Democrats were divided, and Kennedy needed to unify them. Dallas, in particular, was politically hostile territory, a conservative stronghold where anti-Kennedy sentiment ran high. There had been concerns about safety. Adlai Stevenson, the UN ambassador, had been physically attacked by right-wing protesters in Dallas just weeks earlier. The Secret Service was nervous, but Kennedy was determined. If somebody wants to shoot me from a window with a rifle, nobody can stop it, he had told aides, so why worry about it? The motorcade route through downtown Dallas had been published in newspapers. The president would ride in an open-top Lincoln Continental, sitting in the back seat with First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. Texas Governor John Connally and his wife sat in the jump seats in front of them. The crowds along the route were enthusiastic, larger and friendlier than expected. As the motorcade approached Dealey Plaza at 12:30 p.m., Mrs. Connally turned to the president and said, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." Those were nearly the last words Kennedy heard. Seconds later, shots were fired. The president was struck in the upper back and the head. Governor Connally was also wounded. Jackie Kennedy, in shock, crawled under the trunk of the car, trying to recover a piece of her husband's skull. Secret Service agent Clint Hill pushed her back into the seat and shielded them both with his body as the car raced to Parkland Hospital. Doctors worked frantically, but Kennedy's head wound was fatal. At 1 p.m., he was pronounced dead. At 2:38 p.m., Lyndon Johnson was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One, with Jackie Kennedy, still wearing the blood-stained pink suit, standing beside him. She refused to change clothes. "I want them to see what they have done," she said. Within hours, Dallas police arrested Lee Harvey Oswald, a 24-year-old employee of the Texas School Book Depository, the building overlooking Dealey Plaza from which shots were fired. The case against Oswald seemed straightforward. His rifle was found on the 6th floor. His palm print was on the weapon. Witnesses placed him in the building, and he had fled the scene. But Oswald would never stand trial. 2 days later, as police transferred him to the county jail, a Dallas nightclub owner named Jack Ruby pushed through the crowd and shot Oswald dead on live television. Millions of Americans watched it happen in real time. Ruby's murder of Oswald transformed the investigation. The accused assassin could no longer be questioned, could no longer testify, could no longer explain his actions. The most important trial in American history would never happen. Instead of answers, there would be endless speculation. President Johnson appointed a commission led by Chief Justice Earl Warren to investigate the assassination. The Warren Commission conducted an extensive investigation, interviewing hundreds of witnesses and producing a report that concluded Oswald acted alone, firing 3 shots from the 6th floor of the book depository, and that Ruby acted alone in killing Oswald. But many Americans weren't satisfied. The questions multiplied. Why were there apparent conflicts in witness testimony about the number and direction of shots? Why did the Zapruder film, the famous footage of the assassination, seem to show Kennedy's head moving backward, suggesting a shot from the front rather than from Oswald's position behind? How could Oswald have fired 3 accurate shots so quickly with that rifle? Why did Ruby, a minor criminal with no apparent motive, kill Oswald? And if Oswald and Ruby both acted alone, why did both men die before they could fully explain themselves? Within months of the Warren Commission report, alternative theories emerged. Books challenged the official conclusion. Witnesses came forward claiming they heard shots from the grassy knoll in front of the motorcade, not from behind. Researchers pointed to inconsistencies, to evidence allegedly ignored or suppressed, to witnesses who died under suspicious circumstances. The theories multiplied and evolved. Some blamed the mafia, angry at Kennedy's anti-crime crusade. Others pointed to anti-Castro Cuban exiles, furious at Kennedy for the Bay of Pigs failure. Some accused the CIA, supposedly concerned about Kennedy's intentions to withdraw from Vietnam or to reform the intelligence agencies. Others suggested the Soviet Union or Fidel Castro himself. The most elaborate theories proposed a conspiracy involving multiple groups working together. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations conducted a new investigation. They concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, though they couldn't identify who else was involved. This congressional finding gave official credence to conspiracy theories, although later acoustic analysis suggesting a 4th shot was debunked. By the 1990s, polls showed that a majority of Americans believed there had been a conspiracy. Oliver Stone's 1991 film, JFK, presented a conspiracy theory as an established fact, reaching millions of viewers. The Kennedy assassination had become the template for modern conspiracy thinking, the belief that official explanations are cover-ups, that powerful forces manipulate events and hide the truth, that nothing happens by chance and everything is connected. The persistence of Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories reveals something important about how humans process traumatic events and why conspiracy thinking is so appealing. First, the event was genuinely traumatic and incomprehensible. A young, vigorous president, a symbol of hope and possibility, was suddenly murdered in broad daylight. The randomness was terrifying. If Lee Harvey Oswald, a nobody with no clear motive, could kill the president, then the world was frighteningly chaotic and meaningless. Conspiracy theories offered meaning. They suggested that Kennedy died for a reason, as part of a plan, because he threatened powerful interests. That's somehow more bearable than believing he died because one disturbed individual happened to have a rifle and an opportunity. Second, there were genuine irregularities in the investigation. The Secret Service destroyed evidence. The autopsy was poorly conducted. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. The Dallas police investigation was chaotic. These real problems created legitimate questions that fed speculation. When official investigations have flaws, conspiracy theories flourish in the gaps. Third, the institutions that might have provided authoritative answers had lost credibility. By the 1970s, revelations about CIA assassination plots, FBI surveillance of civil rights leaders, and government lying about Vietnam had shattered trust. If the government would lie about those things, why believe them about Kennedy's assassination? The credibility gap that opened in the 1960s has never fully closed. Fourth, conspiracy theories are unfalsifiable. Any evidence against a conspiracy can be dismissed as part of the cover-up. Any witness who contradicts the conspiracy can be accused of being part of it or intimidated into silence. Any investigation that finds no conspiracy must itself be corrupt. This makes conspiracy theories intellectually invincible. They can't be proven wrong because any contrary evidence is explained away. Finally, conspiracy theories are emotionally satisfying. They make believers feel special. They've seen through the lies that fool everyone else. They provide clear villains and simple explanations for complex events. They create community among believers who share this special knowledge. These psychological benefits help explain why conspiracy theories persist even when evidence contradicts them. Yet focusing on conspiracy theories risks missing Kennedy's actual historical significance and the assassination's real impact on American life. Kennedy's death marked the end of a certain kind of American innocence. The 1950s and early 1960s, despite all their problems, had been characterized by broad faith in American institutions and optimism about the future. Kennedy embodied that optimism: youth, vigor, the new frontier, the space race, the Peace Corps. His murder shattered that confidence. What followed was a decade of violence and upheaval: race riots, political assassinations, Vietnam, and Watergate. America lost a certain faith in itself after Dallas. The assassination also changed how we protect presidents. Security around political leaders became far more extensive and intrusive. The days of presidents riding in open cars or walking freely among crowds essentially ended. The bubble around the presidency became thicker, making leaders more isolated and less accessible, a loss for democracy, even if necessary for security. It changed the media coverage of presidents. Before Kennedy, the press had been largely deferential to presidential privacy and discretion. After Kennedy, and especially after Vietnam and Watergate, the press became more aggressive, more skeptical, more willing to investigate and challenge official narratives. This was healthy in many ways, but it also contributed to cynicism and distrust. The assassination influenced how we consume and process traumatic news. The Kennedy assassination was the first major news event that Americans experienced live on television. For 4 days, the networks broadcast nothing but coverage of the assassination, the funeral, and the aftermath. This created a shared national experience of grief, but also established television as the medium through which Americans would collectively experience trauma. We see this pattern repeated with every major national tragedy since. On this November 22nd, 62 years after Kennedy's death, the questions his assassination raised remain painfully relevant. We still struggle with political violence. The assassination attempts on President Reagan, the shooting of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, the attack on the congressional baseball practice, and the January 6th Capitol attack. Political violence remains a recurring threat to democratic stability. Each incident raises the same question Kennedy's death posed. How do we maintain an open, accessible democracy while protecting leaders and participants from violence? We're still grappling with conspiracy culture, now amplified exponentially by social media. The patterns established with Kennedy assassination theories, distrust of official explanations, belief in hidden forces, manipulating events, unfalsifiable claims, communities built around shared alternative narratives, now characterize discourse around everything from 9/11s to school shootings to elections to public health. The Kennedy assassination was perhaps the first modern conspiracy theory, and we've been living with its descendants ever since. We're still dealing with institutional distrust. The credibility gap that opened after Kennedy's death has never fully healed. Substantial portions of the American public don't trust government, media, scientific institutions, or other sources of authoritative information. This makes collective action on any issue immensely difficult. When citizens can't agree on basic facts, how do we govern ourselves? We're still watching the consequences of that loss of innocence. The optimism and faith in progress that characterized the early 1960s seem almost naive now. We're more cynical, more divided, more aware of institutions' flaws and failures. That's not entirely bad. Blind faith in authority is dangerous, but the loss of any shared sense of national purpose or common values is costly too. The truth is, we'll probably never know with absolute certainty everything that happened in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. Too much time has passed. Too many witnesses are dead. Too much evidence was compromised or lost. The most important witness, Lee Harvey Oswald, was murdered before he could explain himself. The Warren Commission's conclusion that Oswald acted alone remains the most evidence-supported explanation. No credible alternative theory has produced definitive proof of a conspiracy. But absence of evidence isn't the same as proof of absence, and the questions will never entirely go away. Perhaps what matters most isn't whether there was a conspiracy, but why so many Americans believe there was and what that belief tells us about trust, institutions, and how we process traumatic events. The Kennedy assassination is a Rorschach test. What people believe about it reveals as much about their worldview as about the historical evidence. What we can say with certainty is that November 22nd, 1963, changed America in profound ways. It shattered assumptions, eroded trust, introduced cynicism, and demonstrated the fragility of democratic institutions. Those changes still shape our politics and culture. Thank you for joining me today on the Daily History Chronicle. As philosopher George Santayana reminds us, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Today we explored how President Kennedy's assassination traumatized a nation and gave birth to the conspiracy culture that still shapes American discourse, reminding us that when institutions lose credibility and traumatic events lack satisfying explanations, distrust and speculation rush in to fill the void. The questions raised in Dallas about political violence, institutional trust, and how we process national trauma remain urgently relevant. The challenge isn't just remembering what happened on November 22nd, 1963, but understanding how that day's unanswered questions still echo through our fractured politics and eroded trust in shared truth. Until tomorrow, May your day be enriched by the lessons of history.